Hello and welcome along to the Matchbook NFL podcast. It's playoff time, wildcard weekend, super wildcard weekend. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined as ever by the unholy trinity of Rob Pizzola, Fabian Sommer, and Drew Dinsick. We've a lot to talk about. We've decided to cover all 6 playoff games for the obvious reasons, but I do want to take a look at the outright betting on the Super Bowl before we get into any of the individual games. For those out there that might want an interest play at a big price, there's going to be 3 big prices put up by the guys here. And Suma, we're going to start with you. The Chargers, you're giving them a squeak. Going on a little playoff run here. I'll throw the betting in on the background there while you take it away.
I think of all the wildcard teams, the Chargers are probably best equipped to start a deep playoff run because they are finally healthy on offense. They will likely get Rashawn Slater back. I don't think this week, but if they advance, they will likely be back against Kansas City. So their whole offense will be completely healthy for the, I think, first time since week 1. And on the other side of the ball, they finally have their full extent of pass rushing quality with Joey Bosa back. And Brent Staley has shown an exceptional ability to game plan for opposing offenses this season. And over the second part of the season, they also ranked like top 5 in EPA per play. Very good against the pass. He really dials up some crazy funky blitzing stuff on third down. So I think that the offense can score on like anyone in the playoffs. And the defense, when you combine the pass rush and the ability to game plan, I think this is something that could separate them from other teams. And at the price at Matchbook, no brainer in my opinion to at least snack a bit of that price.
Yeah, just quickly run through the runners and riders. Chiefs 4.4, Bills 5.1, 49ers 6.2, Eagles 6.4, the Bengals 10.5, Cowboys 19.0, Chargers, as Suma mentioned, 32.0. And before we get into Drew's play here, we've got a comment here, Suma saying, from Patrick on YouTube, how are the Chargers going to make it to the Super Bowl after they lose to the Jags? We'll get into all that, Suma, I'm guessing.
They will likely lose to the Jaguars on a last-minute punt, block return, touchdown or something.
Oh, yeah. Special teams, for sure. Yeah. If the Chargers are going to lose, it's going to be special teams.
Yeah,
yes, exactly. Special teams has been amazing this year, actually.
It actually, from the Anthony Lynn era to now, it's crazy how many games they used to lose by missing a field goal at the end. All sorts of crazy stuff on special teams with the Chargers years past. But Drew's right; it's been much better.
Yeah, Anthony Lynn era. It's still the ghost lives on there. Drew, I touched on the last couple of teams. Vikings 34.0, but you like the Bucs. You think there's slightly value here in match?
Oh yeah, give me a squeak. Yeah, give me a squeak on the Bucs for sure. To me, the name of the game of playing a Super Bowl future this moment is take a horse in the NFC. Just like last year when it was pretty obvious that like the best 2 teams are in one conference and it's not your conference. Number 1, they have to play each other, so you're only going to have to play one of them. Number 2, something chaotic could happen, and somebody else could emerge as the winner of the AFC, at which point, if you pick the right team in the NFC, you could be a pick'em. You could be a favorite in the Super Bowl. That's a massive amount of equity the way you look at prices right now, comparing NFC to Super Bowl prices. So I'm shopping only in the NFC market, and you're telling me there's one quarterback here with the most playoff experience of any human on earth. And he happens to be playing for a team that, not unlike what Suma's case was for the Chargers, they're getting healthy. We probably have not seen their peak. Well, I will say with the Chargers, some of that is speculative. We really haven't ever seen it before that they can reach like championship level football as a unit, right? We have seen it with these guys, with the Buccaneers. They have done it before. And so the idea that their price still sits in the 30s is kind of crazy to me. Nothing really materially has changed other than them getting healthy and other teams in the NFC coming back to earth. Like ratings have deflated on a lot of these other contenders on the NFC. Philly's rating is down from, say, 4 weeks ago. Dallas's rating is down from 4 weeks ago. San Francisco's defense looks like it's sliding to a degree. Health is a question mark for a bunch of these teams all of a sudden. And, oh, by the way, the 7th seed, which could have been the Packers, is now the Seahawks. So it's like, everything is kind of broken positively for the Bucs, yet their price still sits here in the 30s, which is kind of wild to me. I get it, they're home dogs. I get it, they're going to probably have to go at Philly coming off a bye and get a win. But the idea of kind of it's impossible to see Brady leading this group of guys on a run through a playoff field that is weaker than he did previously. I don't think this is a tough ask, and I think this price is just flat out wrong in the 30s.
Okay, yeah, Bucks 36.0. Touching on the next few, Jags 55.0, Ravens 80.0. And a lot of these, if you're betting in the UK and Ireland, the exchange price is far superior than a lot of the sports books out there, if not all of them. And one of those prices, Rob, is the Giants at 85.0. And you're keen to stress you're not necessarily putting this up as a bet, but more so as an interest sort of play. And it could be a team that could go deep in the playoffs, given a lot of Drew's point about the NFC.
Exactly. I agree with everything that Drew said there in terms of, I think the NFC's wide open. I mean, Philadelphia, in my opinion, is an excellent football team. But do we know that for sure? They've beaten nobody this year. They literally beat nobody for the majority of the season. We have San Francisco riding with Brock Purdy, who very easily could lose, in a playoff start and crumble under the pressure in that type of situation. Dallas is falling off a cliff. So for me, I mean, spoiler alert to where we're going here with Giants Vikings later on, but I like the Giants' chances of winning that game. And 85-1, that's a fine price, but what I would recommend instead, and I've seen it in the chat already with some recommendations, is bet the money line on the Giants in the first game, then just roll over those winnings onto the next game, and so on and so forth. You probably will end up with a price that is greater than 85-1 when all is said and done. But they're a team that, good coaching, defense getting it together, Adoree Jackson probably going to be back there. Who knows? The whole conference is a mess. I think that the Giants are probably the value play on the board.
Yeah, and Suma, just bringing up that comment back to the Chargers in terms of, for example, Props and Hops says, would Chargers be a bigger price, 33.0, for example, if you did roll it over, they will be playing two of probably the Bengals, Bills, or the Chiefs, and something you touched on in the WhatsApp earlier today.
I would need to do a quick math. I think it's better than some of the other market prices, but for 32-1, I would need to do some quick math. But I assume it's probably going to be a great money line parlay because if they play at Kansas City next week, they will likely be like 7.5, 7 in that range. Then if they play at Buffalo or at Cincy, at Buffalo, they will likely also be in that 6.5, 7 range. Cincy maybe 4-ish. Something like that. So we would do some quick math on that.
Yeah, maybe for one in the chat to take in. But look, if you want an interest play, and I know some people like to have an outright bets as the playoffs, and we know the routes to the Super Bowl more or less. Let's lock in those three as speculative plays, but they will be up on insights.matchbook.com. Before we get everything, if you're watching the YouTube stream back, do hit that like button and comment who you think is going to win the Super Bowl. I'll screenshot a few and see who's right come February, if any. I don't think too many would have picked the Rams or indeed the Bengals this time last year. So you're being called out in the chat. And if you're listening to the podcast, do hit that 5-star review on Spotify, Apple. And we know a lot of people download them there, and we really appreciate it. Let's get into it. There's 6 games to cover, so there's no time to waste. We'll start with Saturday's game, one of the Saturday's games. It's Seahawks at the 49ers, and take a look at the betting currently on the Matchbook Betting Exchange. Seahawks 4.9 underdogs on the money line. I wouldn't say that maybe a couple of weeks ago. 49ers 1.22. The point spread gives Seahawks a 10-point head start, and the total is 42. Drew, I know you did play the Seahawks at the start of the week. Are you still happy enough with that position at the moment?
Yeah, no real change in opinion here. I was excited the market came with me for a bit there to 9.5. It's kind of drifting back towards San Francisco right now. That's fine. The handicap here is not especially complicated. I think, number one, the 2 quarterbacks coming into this game are somewhat of an unknown in a playoff setting. I think there clearly is, there's familiarity with these teams, obviously playing a third time. And I'm expecting sort of a broad range of outcomes in terms of what you're getting from a Niners and the Seahawks offense in this case, which means this is a high variance game. And if you're going to say one team you're getting 10 points, I'm going to take the 10 points. The likelihood that the Seahawks actually pull off the upset, I think, is not trivial. This is the 2 games where we had these two play each other during the regular season were a bit misleading. Both were pretty horrendous spots for the Seahawks, particularly the first one. Week 2, obviously, Seahawks coming off a Monday Night Football game where they get a win versus Russell Wilson. Like, the idea that they came out flat against the Niners in week 2 shouldn't have surprised anyone. And then similarly, as we get to the Thursday night game, they had a super physical game against the Panthers that they lost. Had to turn around and play a physical Niners team on short rest, and they underwhelmed. Seahawks in general have had obviously some highs and lows over the balance of the season. Other than the Jets game, kind of down the stretch, they didn't really show you anything to suggest that this is a good team, that they're live, that they're any better than average. But certainly the Niners defense has to be a little bit concerning to you if you're feeling super positive about San Francisco heading into this playoff stretch, because they've given up some pretty unimpressive performances here to some pretty bad quarterbacks. The one that stands out most obviously is clearly the Jared Stidham performance against the Vikings. The Niners defense was not good that day, particularly their pass defense. They can be picked on. And I think the Seahawks, and particularly Shane Waldron, with a third crack at that defense, is going to come out with some ways to get the Seahawks on the board here. I would expect them to get into the 17, maybe even 20-point range here. At which point, if you're holding +10, you're feeling pretty good, and you're just hoping against hope that the Seattle defense gives you any kind of sign of life. Brock Purdy is the huge question mark, and he's kind of been the focal point of a lot of the talking around this game. I don't have a strong opinion on what he's going to look like in a playoff setting, but I certainly do think that with the weapons that they have on that offense, McCaffrey, Kittle and company, Deebo Samuel back, the Niners are not a trivial, force to be reckoned with. But Seahawks backers will have the fact that Kyle Shanahan is conservative with the lead in their back pocket. Even in the instance that the Niners come out and play a strong first half of football, expecting Shanahan will kind of tack into his identity and give you a couple extra possessions when he could just put his foot on your throat, I think is a reasonable expectation. So a lot of game states here that I think support Seattle taking the points. So happy to have 2 scores in this one, and looking forward to what I think is going to be a competitive game.
Okay, now I know, Rob, you're neutral enough on this game, but Drew makes a lot of good points there, and particularly on maybe that pass defense of the 49ers, given that Geno Smith set a lot of passing records for the franchise, which I thought was very interesting, given obviously Russell Wilson has been brilliant for the last few years there.
The main issue I have, and I agree that the 49ers, in terms of the way to attack them, would be to pass the ball. A couple issues. I don't know if Seattle has that in their arsenal. Since Kenneth Walker has come back, they're kind of like run-first team now. He's had a lot of explosive plays in the running game. San Fran finished number 1 in the NFL in terms of allowing the least amount of explosive plays on defense in the NFL against the opposing running games. Just 4% of the time they gave up an explosive run. So they're very good at defending that. It's going to be a matter of if Geno Smith can pick them apart. And you look at Geno Smith's season this year, his second and third worst games of the regular season both came against the 49ers defense in terms of EPA per dropback. You look at the game in week 2, he got pressured on 44% of his dropbacks. The 49ers only blitzed on 12% of those plays, and that was the theme in the second game as well, where the 49ers were able to get pressure without having to blitz him, and he just basically didn't know what to do. I mean, I'm pretty much right at market here. It's going to make it sound like I'm leaning towards the 49ers. People in the chat are asking about the weather. There's a flood watch in Santa Clara for Saturday. However, it's expected that most of the rain is going to happen on Saturday morning, and there's a decent chance that we don't get any inclement weather for this game. If it's more inclement, I would lean towards Seattle just because I think that brings the teams closer together. If we have optimal conditions, lean, I guess, a little bit more to San Francisco, but this is one of the games this weekend that I'm very unlikely to be involved with by game time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't have to have a bet in every single game of the playoffs. And Suma, you're neutral enough in this game. And I'll just bring up a couple of the comments about the potential weather forecast. But I think Rob's answered a lot of that.
Yes, Rob basically said everything already. We're currently looking, depending on what forecast you want to look at, we're looking at rain throughout the game, but not too much. And we are looking at gusts up into the mid-30s right now. So the weather forecast, on Tuesday, was pretty drastic, like crazy heavy intensity rain. That has come down. Still not the greatest weather in general, but when you combine the fact that there might be some weather impact and the fact that the Seahawks were not able to do anything against that defense in both matchups, and that it's Brock Purdy's first ever playoff game, that the Niners will probably be rather run heavy against that defense. I think that still makes it some of an intriguing look at the under right now. In terms of the spread, independent of the weather, I think 10 is a very good number in this one. I'm hearing both sides. I think there's a scenario in which the Seahawks maybe get one or two breaks and keep this very close. But I think there's also the scenario that if the Niners bring their A game, there is not too much hope for the Seahawks.
Yeah, tough one for Rob and Suma to call. Drew, I think you brought me there enough to lock in a bet on the podcast. Seahawks plus 10.0. We'll lock that in as a podcast bet, and that'll be up on Matchbook Insight. So first one up from the day. Another game tough to call is the next one is Chargers at the Jags, and we'll take a look at the betting as we have it at matchbook.com. Sorry, Drew, I want you to come in very quickly on the weather. Last thing on the Seahawks and the 49ers.
Oh, yeah. I think myself, I don't know if the other guys would remember this. I know there's a lot of people in the Sharp community who still bear these scars, but the last time there was a San Francisco game that was high profile with an atmospheric river, it went over the total and it hurt badly. There was, of course, Colts Niners last year in primetime, and there was a busted play at the end of that one. Michael Pittman Jr. Took Indy. The Colts come from the dome and score 30 on the mighty San Francisco 49ers, and 48 total points scored in that one. And you know what that closing total was? 42.5.
I had over in this game and got very lucky in the end.
Oh, I remember that.
Beware the weather, of course, and how much it factors in. And we'll move on to the second game. And so we've locked in Seahawks plus 10 there as a fun bet there. We'll move on to Chargers at the Jags and take a look at the betting as we have it at matchbook.com. And Chargers are favored on the road, 1.75. The Jags available at 2.2. The Chargers are taking on -2 on the spread. Jags +2, and the total is 47. Rob, I know you're neutral in terms of a side here and the total, but set up the game for us. It's going to be a massive game. Saturday Night Football is the only thing for those listening in the UK and Ireland, but I'm sure we'll struggle through to maybe 2 or 3 a.m. See how the Chargers are getting on.
So for me, I think it's incredibly difficult to value the Chargers as a whole, because you can look at season-long metrics where they don't look great from an offensive efficiency standpoint. They don't look great from a defensive efficiency standpoint. But when we take a step back and evaluate the season as a whole, okay, missing Joey Bosa, missing offensive linemen over the course of the year, times where Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were both out, Justin Herbert dealing with a rib injury. So how do you use those season-long metrics to really evaluate what the Chargers are now? I think the Chargers are much closer now to the preseason expectation of what the team was going into the year, rather than the way that they've been valued in market for the entirety of the season. I definitely think that Mike Williams is going to be an impactful player if he plays this week, and that's something that I'm really monitoring, because Justin Herbert's numbers without Mike Williams this season are staggeringly low. 6.2 yards per attempt relative to 7.1 yards per attempt. Passing success rate goes down from what would have been 12th in the league with Mike Williams on the field to 20th without him on the field. So I'm really monitoring both of those things. Also, earlier in the year, we saw these two teams play, and a lot of people have that matchup in their mind, but you kind of got to just throw that out the window, because Justin Herbert, like, that was the game that we were all betting on the Jags because we thought Justin Herbert was going to be out, and he decided that he was just going to play that game, and it was horrendous. It was just a horrendous performance altogether. The Chargers had to blitz Trevor Lawrence a ton in that game. The second highest rate he saw all season. 40% of the time, the Chargers defense blitzed, and they got killed. Lawrence against the blitz in that game went 13 of 16, 111 yards, and a touchdown. Now with a healthy Bosa, and having Bosa and Khalil Mack on opposite sides, left tackle Cam Robinson out for Jacksonville, I would anticipate that the Chargers do things very differently this time around. They play more coverage. They can get a pass rush with their front four. I have a strong lean to the Chargers, but the numbers kind of just in this no man's land where I make the Chargers under a field goal favorite. That's where we're sitting. But I might be underrating, I think, LA, because I have no idea what they are. I have no idea what they are at this point. I just know that I look at the roster, I look at the quarterback, and I'm like, this team has, I think, maybe a deep run in them.
Yeah, and on that, to Rob's point, Suma, that with a lot of what the Chargers, it is potential on what, like, throughout all the injuries that Rob's outlined, it is the potential that you see them that they might go on that playoff run. And just on Mike Williams, his injury specifically, Suma, I know a lot of the talk was that he would definitely play, but he obviously wasn't in the practice yesterday, so today's going to be key.
Yes, today will be key. I mean, it's a contusion, and like every doctor says, you can play with that. You are going to get a game day injection, and there should be not too much of an issue with him playing. If he locks another DNP today, I think things could change a little bit, but still gotta trust the doctors here on that one, and I think he should be able to play. If he does not, I think Rob made a very good case that this will downgrade the Chargers offense in general. I think the Chargers can absolutely score on the Jags defense. The Jags defense, they kind of have a decent pass rush, but I think that Justin Herbert can really pick on that secondary if he doesn't hold the ball too long in this matchup. On the other side, what I like about Staley specifically is that he is coming up with superb game plans and really adjusting towards. Oh man, that comment right now is absolute fire. I mean, Chargers game day injections always a risky prop. Yes, props there. Yes, Steady, he came up with a very great game plan in week 2 and held the Chiefs offense to 20 points. They held the Niners offense to 22 points offensively with Jimmy Garoppolo, and that was, I think, the worst rushing game for Christian McCaffrey in his Niners tenure. Dolphins got completely blanketed by Brent Staley, and now you add Joey Bosa into the mix. I think that the Chargers can get home with 4 and with a few well-timed blitzes. I also think that the Jaguars funnel a lot of their offense over the middle of the field. Everything is like in the 0 to 10, 0 to 15 range, and they don't really throw deep because they also don't have the bodies in general. A lot of stuff is screen game, running the ball, getting the ball out quickly over the middle of the field. And they don't really have the bodies on offense to challenge those Chargers cornerbacks on the outside, in my opinion, or challenge them deep. I think if you put Derwin on like Christian Kirk, maybe sometimes, or on Evan Ingram, and you can really funnel that passing offense over the middle of the field. And with a matchup advantage in the trenches, I don't think that the Jaguars offense will be good enough to outscore the Chargers in this game. I also agree with Rob that the number has already drifted a lot. Maybe there's going to be some more Jags money later in the week, don't know. But I'm probably right around that -2, -2.5 for the Chargers, and I like their matchup in general.
Yeah, I've stopped bringing up comments when Suma's talking, just so he can focus on what he's saying. But he still has the comments on the sidebar, as I know. So nothing gets by him. Very good comment, to be fair. Drew, on the Jags, I know you're kind of leaning towards the Jags here. I wasn't very impressed with them against the Titans for large spells of that game. And yeah, did Trevor Lawrence have his bad playoff game, or is it the case that there's more worrying signs for that? Because I thought he missed a simple throw for that touchdown, for example, which would have sealed the game for them a long way out.
Yeah, I missed a lot of throws in that game. That was a bad one. Kind of nasked a little bit in the box score, but I think everyone who put eyes on that tape is probably like, wow, man, was he ready for that pressure? I don't know. Yeah, but his defense carried him. They get the scoop and score late. That was huge. I thought the playoff, that had playoff environment intensity to it, surely. The Titans came in with a very unique game plan. Definitely caught the Jags by surprise in a lot of ways. But they emerged victorious. And I think realistically, this is another huge question mark of a game because as the guys have kind of pointed out, like the Chargers are a bit of an unknown. In sort of the same way that the Bucs are an unknown in terms of the ceiling they can reach, the Chargers are as well. Like they are pretty much out there healthy with the exception of Mike Williams, who we don't really know about, but all indications were from, earlier in the week, Staley's expecting him to practice at some point. He probably plays. But I'm still waiting for best price possible on Jags here. I think once we get the Mike Williams news, we could even see 3. So I have not bet this game yet, but I ultimately intend to bet the Jags, take them as many points as I can get, probably take a little money line as well. And the reason I like the Jags is not even, there are like 10 small soft things that I think you can point out about why Jags make sense here. We can start with the fact that they have the coaching advantage. I don't, rate Staley especially highly. In fact, I think Staley is pretty clearly the 7th best coach of the 7 AFC playoff teams. Even beyond Staley, the part about the Chargers that I am never going to get over is how poorly the offensive coordinator and scheme work, considering the strengths that they have in terms of just quarterback and skill position players. Why they choose to make things harder for themselves, we'll never know. Staley got a lot of credit early in his career for being aggressive on 4th down. That is increasingly looking like luck on his part, that he was going for it and being aggressive in those moments, because he has had a lot of opportunities down the home stretch of the season to prove that he is making the correct mathematical decisions about whether to go forward or kick or whatever. And he's made lots of bad decisions in the back half of this season. So pretty clearly he is no longer a guy that I would consider in the conversation of sharp coaches. I think Peterson is, though. He was able to exercise, an aggressive approach in his run with Nick Foles and company to a Super Bowl. And just in general, I like his offensive scheme, particularly when they're going up against a team that in general struggles to stop the run. When the Jags have balanced offense, that is where their offense looks the best. We went into last week's game, I think all of us kind of in consensus that Tennessee was the side against the Jags. And the reason that one of the reasons that was key was Tennessee's run defense is superlatively good, which meant it was entirely on Lawrence to get the job done. Well, take a lot of pressure off of him in this game because the Jags are going to get going on the ground. They're going to find success. Etienne's going to be a huge part of their win if they win. And I think, just the fact that you could have long sustained drives and balanced attack and, to Suma's point, they are going to try to take advantage of, over the middle of the field. And there's pretty clearly some off-ball linebackers on this, Chargers roster that I'm excited to try to attack if I'm Doug Peterson. So I think they can get it done. And I do think to a degree that was, at least a sort of playoff debutante stinker, if you want to call it that, for Trevor Lawrence last week. And he's a little bit more comfortable this week having that experience under his belt. I think Jags in general and Duval County is a meaningful home field advantage. Like, that place was electric and definitely elevated the team's performance, particularly their defense in that game. And I would expect the same even in the case that they are at a deficit here. Tough travel spot for the Colts as well. For the Chargers as well. They had to go at the Colts before hosting the Rams at the Broncos last week at altitude. Now they got to fly across the country. The time favors them a bit because it's more of a favorable time for a West Coast team, but still just a lot of travel lately for this Chargers squad, on top of the fact that, they are reintegrating some pieces who have had pretty long layoffs. So, again, I'm kind of highlighting a lot of small things here. I like the chemistry that Trevor Lawrence has shown on the back half of this season with his receiving core. Certainly Evan Ingram has emerged as a very valuable target for them, on top of the fact that, Christian Kirk is a game breaker if they decide that they do want to attack down the field. So it's, I think there's a lot of options. I think there's a lot of positives here. I'm nervous about the pass defense for the Jaguars, surely. Like, if Herbert is cooking, if Williams is perfectly healthy, like, this all of a sudden turns into a track meet, team with the ball last wins kind of feeling to me. And then I'm a lot less confident. But either way, my numbers make this a pick 'em. I'm speculating and upgrading even the Chargers to get there. But I don't mind taking the points with the team against, Staley on the road. First playoff, experience for Justin Herbert as well. So chance that he comes out and is a little bit less than crisp to start. So, those are basically all my small reasons, I think, to take the points with the Jags.
And very quickly, we didn't mention your cover, Drew, mainly leaned towards because you have a few Jags futures, so you took the points with the Titans. That, as covers go, that's as good as it gets, isn't it?
Hitting that middle was the start of a really just a tremendous weekend for me last weekend. Yeah.
Liking it.
That
So
was awesome.
not enough for a bet. Both Drew and Suma are going to watch the line to see if it does move to that 3, and for different reasons they might potentially take that on. So we won't lock in a bet for that game, but that is the Saturday night football game. We'll move on to Sunday, And the first one in the 6 o'clock slot in the UK and Ireland is the Dolphins at the Bills. We've seen this matchup a couple of times this year already. Dolphins, you can currently back at 6.8, Bills 1.15. The point spread gives Dolphins a 13.0. That's gone out a lot given the Tua news. And the total is 43. Suma, we'll go to you for this one. You've kind of just written here, it's tough to make a case for Miami Dolphins. And I think that just about sums up. Despite the 13 points they will get, they are using a third string quarterback.
Yes, even at 13, I could not take the Dolphins, to be honest. I mean, Skylar Thompson, road playoff game, tough environment, tough team. Bills should be able to score on the Dolphins defense like they basically always do. That first game early in the season was kind of a fluky result because the Bills were driving the ball like for 90 plays and 500 yards or something, but just failed in the red zone. Also with that goal line turnover from Josh Allen that basically sealed the Miami win and cover. But I just don't see how Skylar Thompson in this one will be able to keep up. In that matchup a few weeks back, the Dolphins were suddenly doing some funky under center motion one stuff that really got into the second level of the Bills quite often and created some explosive plays. I think with Skylar Thompson now under center, I think that the Bills will play the one a lot more aggressively in general. And then they will basically just say, hey, Skylar Thompson, we will load the box, try to beat us deep, air it out, and see what happens. Tyreek Hill banged up, Jalen Waddle banged up. I just think this is a super tough matchup for the Dolphins. I completely agree with the move to into the 13 and a half range, and I'm really, really struggling to make a good case for the Dolphins here.
Yeah, you may be struggling to make a case for the Dolphins. Rob's struggling so much he's going to put up the Bills minus 13. Big handicap, Rob.
I mean,
interesting.
This one's very challenging too because it's all on like what your adjustment from Tua is to Skylar Thompson. And I watched the Jets and Dolphins in full last week, and Skylar Thompson is not ready to play in the NFL. And he's going to have his first career road game on the road at Buffalo with DeMar Hamlin probably going to be in attendance at this game. Like, you can't pick a worse possible situation for a young quarterback who's not good to be just thrust into. So this essentially becomes, can the Dolphins do it with their defense? Possibly, but what have they shown us recently? The acquisition of Bradley Chubb, it's helped a little bit, but overall, this is still a bottom half unit in the entire league. I just don't see them being able to force enough stops to keep it close. A lot of arguments I've seen that are made for Miami this week, which I just like to dismiss, is, you know, a lot of people will say it's the playoffs. You tend to see closer games in the playoffs, too big of a spread for a playoff game, so on and so forth. We tend to not see spreads this high in the playoffs, and it's an extremely small sample, which, I mean, I'll dismiss it regardless. But if you go back since the year 2000, there's been 8 teams that have been favored by 10 or more in this wild card round. They've gone 7-1 against the spread. So typically when we have seen these big spreads in the past, it has been blowouts. That does not factor into my handicap of the game. But for all those who want to take Miami because they think it's just a given that playoff games are close, I would kind of pump the brakes on that. But I'm just, you know, I think there's a massive adjustment here from Skylar Thompson, all the way from Tua to Skylar Thompson. We see that in Tyreek Hill's numbers, especially. His yards per route run goes way down. He no longer is targeted down the field like he is with Tua. He's no longer targeted as much as he is with Tua in there as well. And I think that makes a very tangible, big impact on Miami's ability to move the ball in this game. So I think this is short. I thought when the announcement of Skylar Thompson starting came in, especially since now the Bills know who they're preparing for, the number would have moved up even further. I make this on the other side of 14.
Okay. The YouTube comments have taken off as Rob was talking there about Skylar and Breaking Bad being potentially better than Skylar Thompson and a few others talking about.
Skylar on Breaking Bad, one of the most annoying TV characters in history. Like, great actress and a gun, but horrible. Like, I wanted to turn off some episodes because of Skylar on Breaking Bad.
Yeah. But it's listen, she could potentially do a job for the Dolphins this weekend. Drew, for you in this one, and look, something I would have probably brought up with Rob there, but he kind of covered a lot with the 7-1 sort of angle. But I guess people will be saying and listen to this podcast going, but why have the Bills just ease up in those last few minutes? And you might have a little angle there with a potential second half under in play.
Yeah, I mean, people typically look at the Bills and they're like, they keep their foot on the gas, and it's true. A lot of examples where they, just have absolutely flexed on teams, even though the margin was unreachable. And first thing that comes to mind is last year's wild card playoff game against the Patriots, where they, scored 7 touchdowns in 7 drives or something insane like that. This is a little bit of a different situation, however. I think with the fact that the Bills are looking at now 2 very challenging AFC games to get to a Super Bowl, the conservatism in the second half could creep into the game plan a bit. On top of the fact that the Dolphins have one strength on defense, they can stop the run. And so the idea of the Bills kind of going into a little bit more conservative mode, not really finding a ton of success on the ground running, and then this just being a pretty unwatchable second half of football is sort of my baseline expectation. I agree with all of the guys' points on Skylar Thompson, except I can even add one, which is that not only is he not ready to play in the NFL, but he's hurt. He got popped in the knee pretty good against the Jets and was useless thereafter. And so I don't even really know what you're going to ask him to do in this game in terms of, just be mobile or stand in the pocket and deliver deep balls. Like, the game plan for the Dolphins could be quite conservative here, which plays into the, sort of the way that Leslie Frazier wants to defend. And I think, this could be one-way traffic Bills real in the first half, and then just a real slow second half. I don't mind playing Bills first half. I don't mind laying those points. I think the move is correct, and Bills could have had this one wrapped up early. Fun story about this week, since I don't really have any kind of bets. Lot of very informational people with reputation of being correct had information from Tua's camp that he was going to go. And that caused a move in the direction of Miami. And at the time, I took no action because I was like, oh my God, we're going to get an absolutely amazing bet on the Bills here. This is insane. And the reasons were very straightforward. Tyreek Hill is completely broken. He's dealing with a very meaningful ankle injury. They're not even putting him on the injury report, but he does not have game-breaking stuff right now, as far as I can tell you. Hill banged up. Waddle banged up, as mentioned. There's no left tackle. And so now you have a non-mobile quarterback, against a decent pass rush with no tackle. And Chubb even banged up. So I'm not exactly sure how you're manifesting a pass rush in this game. I thought Miami was a good bet last week because I figured Flacco sitting duck in a pocket against the pass rush was going to get eaten alive. He really wasn't. He was fine. And so, I think Miami's in deep trouble here. Bills first half is a good look. Second half under is a good look. I don't mind laying the points and putting them in teasers for that matter, even though it's not an advantage teaser leg. You can still get across, get to 7, I guess, at this point. So worth playing.
Okay. I think we were enough there, Rob, to lock in Bills minus 13. My ears pricked up at that 7-1 stat since the year 2000. The trendy Rob strikes again. You lay it out so well, matchups, everything, and you give me that one little nugget of a trend or a stat, and I'm sold. Like, it's amazing, isn't it? We'll lock that in. Bills minus 13.0 currently at Matchbook in and around the 1.93 mark. We'll move on to the third, our next game here, on Sunday. And this is the 9:25 game, I think it is, on Sunday. Giants at the Vikings. Prime time for the UK and Ireland, so a little bit disappointed with that. Take a look at the betting. Giants 2.46, Vikings 1.64. The point spread gives Giants a 3-point head start, and the total is 48. Rob, you're pretty sweet on a side here.
I am. It won't surprise the viewing audience who's been viewing
we
all
give them
year.
a minute. Give them a minute to come in the comments if they want. But go on.
Which side? But I think that the Giants are the valuable side in this game. First and foremost, we did see these teams play a few weeks back, and the line closed Minnesota minus 4.5 at home to the Giants. And people seem to be very hung up on that being the closing line and saying, well, how can we see this much of an adjustment over the course of just a few weeks? For starters, if people remember, I liked the Giants in that game already, so I was not near the market closer. But on top of that, we have to account for that game as well. And yes, Minnesota won, they got out-yarded badly. The Giants had 6.9 yards per play in that game to the Vikings 5.0. The difference was the 2 turnovers that the Giants committed overall in that contest, which ultimately cost them. And since then, we've seen other games between these teams. We saw the Vikings get shellacked by the Packers, who are not making the playoffs either. So there's more data points in between then that also tell us that maybe the Vikings are not as good as their record. Maybe the Giants are a little bit better in the second half of the season. One thing I'm really looking forward to here, it looks like Adoree Jackson is trending towards being back for the Giants at corner. That will help them a lot, especially in this game, because if we look at the matchup from a few weeks ago, the Giants do what they always do. They blitz a lot on defense. They're the highest blitzing team in the entire league with Wink Martindale as their defensive coordinator there. Kirk Cousins played very well against the blitz in that game. He went 15 of 23, 171 yards, 2 touchdowns. A lot of that because he's just lobbing him up to Justin Jefferson one-on-one. I don't think the Giants are going to change their style of defense, but bringing in a top-level corner again, not going to shut down Justin Jefferson. That's not what I'm saying. But somebody who can make a few more plays on the outside, I think tilts this into the New York Giants' favor. And also, that was a bit of an anomaly for Kirk Cousins under pressure this year. He hasn't been great by any means under pressure for the majority of the season. So I like the Giants' defense in terms of being able to put in a better performance than we saw a few weeks ago. On the other side of things, there's just not much to say about the Vikings defense anymore that hasn't been said. They're just not good. They don't defend anything really well. They especially struggle in the secondary. Against the Giants in their first matchup, they played a lot of 6-man boxes, which they've been doing a lot this year because their secondary is so bad, they have to drop more people into coverage. Saquon Barkley had a great game. I would expect him to have another good game again here. I can't get to 3 in this game. I don't think there's much separating the Vikings and the Giants. So give me New York plus the points. That's probably my favorite look this week.
Okay, Suma, say something that Rob hasn't for your play here in the Giants plus 3. Go on.
I can't really because Rob has made all the great points that I also would have made. One thing to add is that the Giants, they are extremely blitz heavy, and Kirk Cousins, it was a common theme throughout the season that Kirk Cousins has consistently struggled against blitz. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the scheme adjustment to Kevin O'Connell. Maybe they don't have enough quality hot rods. I just don't know what it is, but Kirk Cousins has consistently been below average in comparison to the rest of the league against the blitz. And I also think that the Vikings offensive line will be completely overmatched in obvious passing situations because Dexter Lawrence is an absolute monster, arguably the best nose tackle in the league this year. Leonard Williams, Kevin Thibodeau is coming along. Right tackle Brian Neal will be out. We don't know about Garrett Bradbury yet. I guess that's maybe like 60-40 that he's going to play. I think that the Giants can move the ball on the Vikings. They did it on Christmas Eve already. It was just the 2 turnovers deep into Vikings territory that basically killed them, but they were moving the ball with ease on that Vikings defense. And then on the other side, like Rob has said, if they get Adoree Jackson back, that will be huge, especially with all the blitz man schemes that Wink Martindale is running. I think the Giants are absolutely live here. I cannot get to the 3 here. I'm around 2 for this game. I like the G-Man, and yes, I would not be surprised at all if we saw Giants at Eagles next week.
Okay. Drew, I know you're a pass on this, but quick thoughts on Rob and Suma's points.
Yeah, I guess I kind of have to make a point why I didn't bet the Giants then.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's what I should ask, really. Yeah, go on.
I just have a very, very high push probability on 3. Like a lot of my game simulations land Vikings by 3, and that shouldn't be surprising because something like 40% of the Vikings wins this season came by 3 points. And this is a very weird team. Did you guys know that Kirk Cousins leads the league with 8 fourth quarter comebacks this year? 8 game-winning drives. I watched a lot of Vikings games. I certainly didn't come away with the impression that Kirk Cousins was some late game magician that was, willing this team to victory. But sure enough, there were. The other kind of weird, funny things about this game and this handicap, to me at least, are a lot of people I've heard say the Giants are playing their best football right now, which the data doesn't say that. at all. The win-loss definitely doesn't support that. I think people kind of really, really, really overweighted them destroying the Colts, who are effectively an FBS team. And so I worry a little bit that the Giants aren't quite as good as, market expectation is right now, at least in the back of my head. Daniel Jones, Daniel Jones went from, even as a 7-win quarterback or middle of this season, people being like, no, you don't keep bringing him back. Like, you can't put your future on this guy. He then goes 2-5-1, and people are like, oh yeah, well, they really did something with Daniel Jones this season, and we're gonna, we're not only bringing him back, but he might be the future franchise quarterback here. And it's like, I get it. The Giants invested a lot in developing the kid, and he certainly has taken a meaningful step forward. But so much of his success comes specifically from the way that Kafka and Dable are scheming the offense and giving him the running lanes, and his ability to get it down on the ground is without question. He is a very elusive quarterback. So all said, like, I do worry a bit about the Giants being overrated. Vikings have the best player in this game, and Justin Jefferson, clearly. Like, he's maybe even more so than Kirk Cousins getting credit for all those 8 game-winning drives. Like, this Vikings team beat the Buffalo Bills because of Justin Jefferson. There are several other games where he was absolutely instrumental to them, kind of, in comeback mode. So, his sort of kind of finding an elite, I'm the best player on the field, I'm willing this team to victory is still real. So then, if the fair price is 3 and it's a very strong fair, in my opinion, how do you attack this game? You're looking for a total bet, maybe. You're looking for a live bet, an in-play bet. I think there are a lot of potential angles to play this game live. Either of these teams gets a 2-score lead, I am firing on the dog without hesitation. Firing on the dog. I don't trust either of these teams to be able to put this game away comfortably. And oh, by the way, either of these teams have a meaningful lead, and it's a little bit of a lower scoring, kind of a snoozer through 2-3 quarters. Firing on the over. Like, this game opening up in the fourth quarter and being like trading scores late, even if it's just field goals, this game going to overtime potentially is very real in my mind. And for those of you who are handicapping at home, the overtime rules now in the playoffs are different. The maximum points that can be scored in the overtime period are no longer, what was it? What did it used to be? 12 or whatever you could get. You score, I guess it was, yeah. The maximum you used to be able to get has gone up because you now have each team gets the possession even if the first team scores a touchdown and a field goal. So 2 teams scoring 13 points is entirely on the table because the second team going for 15 points is entirely on the table. And then it's sudden death after that. So you could even get a 17-point overtime period. So totals could, in any game that is going to overtime, could potentially be impacted pretty aggressively. I don't think that makes an over 48 a play, but it's definitely going to be in my mind betting live. And I think I'd like to see the Giants win because it would be a cool story. I love Dable. I like, in general, what that team is doing in terms of building a core. I don't think the Vikings necessarily deserve to be here. They're my 3rd power ranked team in the NFC North right now. The other 2 teams are not in the playoffs. And Vikings extremely lucky to be a 13-win team and be here. I don't think they're as low a team rated as like Football Outsiders makes them, but that this is not an especially above average team as far as I can tell you. So I don't know. I'd like to see the Giants win for entertainment purposes, but if the Vikings win, I think that sets up a decent bet against them next week. So either way is fine with me.
Yeah. A couple of interesting live plays there, particularly good point on the overtime, the old Chiefs and Bills rule there from last year. So we won't lock in that as a bet, guys, because there are bets coming up in the best bets, and I'll leave it there. We'll move on to Ravens at the Bengals. Not much shouts here, so we will go through this game rather quickly in the interest of time. We've got Ravens currently available on the money line at 4.6, Bengals 1.24. The point spread sees Ravens get a 9.5 head start, and the total is 40.5. Drew, you do want to pass at the current market prices, but any quick thoughts on how this game sets up for Sunday night?
Yeah, I mean, best luck to the Ravens, I guess. They made their bed, though. I feel like if they treat their franchise quarterback a little differently, and they construct their roster a little differently, he maybe is rehabbing a little more aggressively, and he's playing in this game, and this is going to be a really good game. I think without Lamar Jackson involved, this is a, pretty clearly one way action Bengals. I'm surprised that some of the market making books have been so slow to acknowledge the fact that Lamar is not playing in this game. It has taken until this morning for them to get out into the 9.5 range. And even today's move was a little confusing to me because Huntley threw today, and I watched the tape. Looked kind of fine to me. I think this is maybe actually Huntley, not Anthony Brown. So not sure exactly why there was such an aggressive move out to 9.5 at some of these shops today. I would expect that the Ravens' offensive game plan is to try to shorten the game as much as possible. I would expect that an ideal drive for them is 15 plays, 8 minutes long, coin flip if they get the touchdown or kick a short field goal, and expecting a pretty heavy ground attack here, try to put the Bengals to sleep and then play keep away, hope that they get some turnovers. Ultimately, I don't think any of that is going to work. I think the Bengals ultimately win this game and hopefully win with margin, because I staked the Bengals pretty good when it was under 7. I have a lot of teasers tied into the Bengals. I have some parlays with Bengals and under at some decent prices. So if the Bengals lose this game, I'm going to be in a little bit of a tight spot on Monday morning.
Yeah, Rob, over to you. You're neutral as well. Just to shout that the Matchbook line has gone from 9.5 to 10 now in the hour. So those banners were made. So just a bit of money for the Bengals.
Yeah, I'm kind of around in this dead zone here in terms of what I think the number would be in the game if Huntley played as well. I don't like betting against Joe Burrow for obvious reasons. I think of any quarterback not named Tom Brady, Joe Burrow would be the one that has a personal vendetta against Rob Pizzola. However, it's hard to see the Ravens competing in this game offensively. I think it's got to be on the backs of their defense overall. One thing I will say about last week's performance, that wasn't the greatest performance by the Bengals. They lose the right guard, Alex Kappa, in that game to injury. Aside from, basically they won that game because of the turnovers by Anthony Brown in at quarterback last week for the Baltimore Ravens. Aside from that, they were struggling to move the ball. So maybe there is some sort of outcome here where the Ravens just play really good defense. The first time these teams matched up earlier in the year, the Bengals were able to run the ball very well. They had 2.43 yards before contact per carry in that game, that first meeting. Last week, 0.15 yards before contact per carry. The Ravens were in the backfield a whole lot. That might happen again this week. The challenge is Tyler Huntley going to go on the road and win them a game? What is the ceiling for the Ravens offense right now? It seems to me like it's probably somewhere in the range of 17 to 20 points, and I just don't think that gets that done in Cincinnati. So tough one for me to call. I think the market's pretty much right on this game. If somebody was forcing a play on every game this weekend and wanted to bet everything, I would be inclined to bet the under here between Baltimore and Cincy, but I think the market prices are pretty fair.
Okay, that total is 40.5 for anyone that does want to play. And Suma, you're probably looking at Bengals more for teasers. So for those in the UK and Ireland, that would be alternative handicaps.
Yeah, not anymore since the market has moved.
Since that move, okay, yeah.
So tough game at the current market price. I think that the Ravens in general have the defense to slow down the Bengals offense. They did it twice already this season. They are looking to be a little bit healthier this week. I think they can play the kind of coverage to give Joe Burrow trouble, but like Rob has said, their own offense just cannot compete with Anthony Brown quarterback. I don't think he's an NFL starting caliber quarterback, so it also makes sense that the total moved down to 40.5 right now. Could be a very boring game where the Ravens often struggles to generate any efficiency, and the Bengals might only put together a few good scoring drives because the Ravens defense plays them tough.
Yeah, no, we would expect Bengals to win, but no exact plays from the guys, at least official bets that we're going to put up. And we're flying through these, but we're going to go to the last one here, and we'll go to Drew on this one, the Cowboys at the Bucs, Monday Night Football, and take a look at the betting that we currently have at matchbook.com. Cowboys 1.72, Bucs 2.24. Bucs getting a 2.5 head start, and the total's 45.5. And Drew, I'm going to you. They're your team now. You put them up to win the Super Bowl here on Matchbook, so take it away. They surely beat the Cowboys at home here at Slight Dogs.
Yeah, Mike McCarthy's laying points on the road. What? Mike McCarthy's laying points in the road with Sean Payton looking over his shoulder. Oh boy. No, the handicap here is like, even just from a raw number standpoint, like you're telling me that there's effectively a field goal or more separating the Cowboys and the Bucs right now is a really, really, really tough thing for me to wrap my head around. There is very little margin between these two teams on a neutral field, in a neutral situation, with considering the health that the Bucs are bringing into this game. I could even make a case that the Bucs are a better team. Cowboys, the Cowboys Bucs was week 1. One of my bigger stakes that I've had in all season was on that under, and it was an absolute no-brainer. And I look at this market now and I'm thinking, man, this looks like a decent over bet. And a lot of that is just sort of the maturation of the Bucs offense, which came into the season with very little chemistry in the preseason because of how much time Tom Brady missed, with how many injuries they were dealing with, Godwin coming off the ACL, new offensive line with no cohesion. A lot of those questions have been answered for me. And as I sit here now and I look at the Bucs as a team, the only real question that I have about them at all, besides kind of can they stay healthy, is like, can Tom Brady just wrestle the offensive identity away from Byron Leftwich? Because what Byron Leftwich tries to do in sort of the neutral game sequencing and play calling has not worked at all this year. You don't need any more evidence. Like, it's all on tape. It's all in the numbers. It's everywhere. Like, it has not been a good offense in neutral state. When it has become, must-win time and Brady rips the playbook out of, Leftwich's hands and he's effectively kind of field generaling this squad, they're elite offensively. The fact that he has reestablished some connection with Mike Evans, particularly in that Panthers game, I think matters a ton. If Evans is a threat in this game, particularly against the Cowboys secondary, they can't cover, deep verticals, like, forget about it. Like, Bucs are going to score in this one. They're going to put massive scoreboard pressure on the Cowboys, which I think spells huge trouble because, Dak Prescott hasn't ever proven it really to me, at least in a high pressure environment. He's had a very poor year. People will kind of point to, I led the league in interceptions. He missed 5 games or whatever. Like, yeah, that's true. But like, even in the games he played, he never really put together 4 good quarters of football, not even in the game that they destroyed the Vikings. And so it's tough to expect that he's going to be able to go score for score with Brady in this spot. CeeDee Lamb, maybe the only guy on the Cowboys that I'm especially afraid of here, considering Tony Pollard dealing with some injuries. So, I'm looking specifically for Jamel Dean and, there's some safety help to take him, his game breaking elements out of this contest. And then, at that point, for all of Todd Bowles' shortcomings as a head coach, he at least is still, in my mind, a good defensive coordinator against a certain type of offense, and this offense qualifies. I think, Vita Vea is going to have a meaningful impact in this one. So every handoff to Zeke Elliott likely wasted down, and then if they can generate any pressure with the blitz, then Dak Prescott throwing balls into the dirt and throwing the ball out of bounds, getting sacked, potentially creating turnovers, all play into the strength of the Bucs. So I'm seeing only positives for the Bucs in terms of matchups in this one. I think the number itself as a starting point ought to be a pick 'em, if not Bucs favored by a small amount. So Bucs money line is the way to go for me in this one.
Okay, and I know, Suma, you're playing this a little bit more cautiously. You're going to hoping for the Bucs flat 3 at the moment. Plus 2.5 is even. If you did want to go out to that plus 3, it is 1.78. So a good bit of a jump there, obviously, given the key number.
I will not hold this group back from logging Tampa Bay money line on our show sheet.
Thanks, Suma.
But yeah, like Drew has already mentioned a lot of stuff that I would also have brought up. I think that this is a tough matchup for the Cowboys because they have a great edge rush. The Bucs have Tristan Wirfs and Donovan Smith, a very decent tackle tandem. They might get Ryan Jensen back, which would be huge for this offense, in my opinion. The Cowboys are not that strong on the middle of their defensive line. I think that the Bucs can also run the ball on the Cowboys, and then they also have like this trio of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Julio Jones. against a secondary of the Cowboys that is already down 2 starting cornerbacks in John Lewis and Anthony Brown. And they also lost their rookie cornerback Bland last week. Don't know if he's going to play. That would put Calvin Joseph back in the formation. And if Tom Brady sees Calvin Joseph out there, he will probably check and put out an audible, let's throw it on this guy all day long. So I think this is a tough matchup for the Cowboys defense. And on the other side, like Drew has mentioned, this Bucs defense is likely going to be healthy. The Cowboys played with a very, very shaky offensive line formation last week with Conor McGovern at center. Tyler Smith was at left guard. That didn't work out well against the Washington defensive front. I think Todd Bowles would cook something up there with his blitz packages on third down if they continue to put out this O-line combination. And outside of CeeDee Lamb, there aren't really too many threats on the Cowboys offense. Dak has been very inconsistent with his turnovers. I think this is not a great matchup for Dallas, and I think there's a reason why the Bucs are not giving 3 here, and this number is below a field goal.
Yeah, and Rob, you're in agreement on the money line with Tampa, and some of the points that Drew made. Tom Brady was interviewed in his press conference, asked a lot about is he going to be calling a lot more plays. So that is an interesting sub-narrative, I guess, this game.
It is an interesting sub-narrative. I'm going to be on the air in the fourth quarter of this game with Drew as a Cowboys fan, so he's going to see me at my absolute worst. I did not want this matchup as a Dallas fan for a long time. I mean, the saving grace is potentially you have a Bucs coaching staff that just does what they frequently do, which is, pound the ball, Leonard Fournette, first down for half a yard, and then force Brady to overcome that. With that said, if we get into a game state here where Tampa Bay is throwing the ball and Brady is releasing the ball quickly, which I think he can do against the Cowboys defense that, frankly, as Suma said, has major injuries in the secondary, I can see Tampa Bay putting up a pretty big number in this game. These teams played in week 1 long time ago. Obviously, very different teams. Tampa fully healthy. They do get their full complement of corners this week, by the way, for the first time in a long time do the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this game. But the Bucs moved the ball up and down the field in that game. They just kept stalling in the red zone. And that was a lot of quick passing. They didn't let the Cowboys pass rush really tee off on them overall. And if they kind of stick to that same game plan, I don't know that Dallas can do anything to stop that. It'll be on Dak Prescott to move the ball. And is he capable? Of course he is. He didn't have a great second half of the year by any stretch of the imagination, but he is capable. I'm just, speaking in terms of probability and likelihood. I think that this is much closer to a pick'em than people will realize. And I think the Cowboys as a whole, their market number or their rating in market is really propped up by the first half of the year, where they were a lot better than they were in the second half of the year. And I think if you just start to look at what was going on in the latter half of the season, barely scraping by some bad teams like Houston at home, Dak Prescott just throwing interception after interception, it really makes them look more like an average team altogether. So, I'd love to be wrong about this, but I think the Bucs money line has some pretty good value this week.
Before we lock in a bet here, wasn't it the Ravens game that we promised ourselves we wouldn't back the Bucs again after they lost? There was definitely Rob. You promised me.
It was the Niners, I think. That one.
It was the 49ers game. Listen, Trendy Rob will make a second appearance here. Tom Brady, 7-0 career against the Cowboys. His most wins against any single opponent without a loss.
Wow.
I only mention this because as a Cowboys fan, and by the way,
which one was the most painful?
These games from 10 years ago don't matter, by the way. Like, I'm not suggesting that they do, but if anyone's wondering, well, why was Rob rooting to not face Tampa Bay in the first round for months? It's because I've seen this happen over and over and over in my lifetime, and that's all that's going through my head. So, yes, Trendy Rob makes a second appearance on the Matchbook pod this week.
Okay, look, the best bets will be brief. Actually, I think I closed that podcast by saying Tom Brady's going to the playoffs, which he still is, to be fair. So, although the best bet didn't get up. Seahawks plus 10 is a bet we're going to lock in from Drew. Bills minus 13 is a bet we're going to lock in from Rob. You probably guessed the best bets, but if you haven't yet, Suma, take it away. Your best bet on the card.
Giants +3. Giants are alive. I've been very low on the Vikings for weeks now. I also like the Vikings. On Christmas Eve, I think they will move the ball on offense. I think that their defensive line can create a lot of havoc against that Vikings offensive line without their starting right tackle. I think the only strong case I could make for the Vikings is that the Justin Jefferson Kirk Cousins connection is like the most high variance component of this matchup, because the Giants don't have that in their arsenal. But other than that, I don't think that the Vikings defense is really better than the Giants one, especially with Dory Jackson back. And from an efficiency perspective, you can also not make the case that the Vikings offense has been any better than the Giants. They struggle to run the ball, and it really all comes down to, can Kirk Cousins hit Justin Jefferson down the field? I'm betting he will not be able to do this consistently enough, and therefore I like the Giants at 3.
Yeah, copy and paste for you, Rob.
Exact same thing for the most part. Again, if you're fixated on what the closing spread was the last time these two teams played, lots of things have happened since then. Vikings offensive line injuries, Giants defense healthy for the first time in a long time. Giants outplayed the Vikings in that game despite the final score result. I run an expected points every single week based off of closing box score metrics. I had the Giants winning that game by 2.7 points on average rather than losing it outright. So I'll piggyback on everything that Suma has said there. I think this is the most valuable bet on the board, predominantly because of where the number is, with 3 being a key number. You need the Vikings to win by 4 in order to lose the bet, but I like New York quite a bit this week.
Yeah, it's set up to be a close game. Drew, Bucs money line 2.24 currently on Matchbook. Seems a big price at home.
Yeah, this game is being priced like this is peak Cowboys, which we haven't seen since November, going up against the Bucs, who you are pricing using an exact reflection of what you've seen from them this season when they have been missing half the team at times. Bucs coming in fully healthy, I think, warrant a lot more respect than this, and I will happily take them over 2 on the money line against a Cowboys squad that I think is going to go into the offseason looking for some changes.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. We're going way over time there, but we wanted to get all 6 games in. Hopefully the guys have just got you some way there. If you haven't got a Matchbook account, you can see the welcome offer on screen. Bet £30, get £30 in free bets. That's a £10 bet each week, and that will continue throughout the playoffs. Just enter the bonus code Matchbook NFL. You can check in the description if you're listening on the podcast. That will be there. My thanks to Rob. My thanks to Suma. My thanks to Drew. We'll be back next week. It's hard to believe after this weekend we're only going to have 7 NFL games left of the season. We'll leave you on that sour note. But for now, take care. Tom Brady and Chargers will see those 2 teams next week. Please, God. Take care. Bye-bye.